Hey everyone, check out this creepy tale I've got for you. So, there's this girl named Sarah who just inherited her estranged aunt's mansion. Sounds cool, right? Except, this mansion is not an average house. Will Sarah manage to escape the clutches of the house and its horrifying secrets? You'll have to watch to find out. Let's begin. I still don't know what made me walk down that alleyway. Maybe a shortcut would have saved me time. That's what I told myself at the beginning, anyway. The stench hit me first, that rotting metallic tang that makes your stomach churn. Then, a moan. Low and drawn out, like someone dragging the last bit of air through their windpipe. My stupid, bleeding heart curiosity won out over common sense. What else was there to do on a late Friday night besides try and find the source of that awful sound? I crept down the shadowed alley. Dumpsters lined the wall, overflowing bags of trash mounted in the center. Each agonized groan seemed louder than the last. My shoes squeaked against wet concrete, a jarringly bright sound in the eerie silence. Then I saw the door. Just a battered metal thing, slightly ajar, right at the end of the alley. Light spilled from the crack, a dim yellow glow against the inky darkness. It was a warmth I shouldn't have craved, but I was drawn to it. I shouldn't have gone closer, but I did. That's where my nightmare truly began. The smell inside that wretched little house was a gut punch. Imagine blood and bleach and something unidentifiably sweet and foul underneath it all. My eyes struggled to adjust. It took a moment to understand what I was seeing her. The woman was chained to a chair in the middle of the bare room, no furniture otherwise, just grime on the walls and that horrible smell. Her skin was a tapestry of bruises, black, purple, and a sickening yellow-green where things were starting to heal. Some of her wounds were raw and glistening, deep enough that I shouldn't have been able to see her alive. Her eyes were vacant, rolled back in her head, and all that was left of her voice was a thin, bubbling whine. He wasn't facing me. Dressed in an apron spattered with dark stains, he crouched over her like some twisted butcher. In his hands, well, let's just say it looked like a piece of her. I gagged, but it came out as a choked-off whimper. It was enough. He spun around with impossible speed despite his bulk. I got a glimpse of his face, slack with something far worse than surprise. He was delighted. His grin was wide, lips curled back too far, showing too many teeth. I ran. The alley was a blur, but his heavy footfalls behind me echoed a gruesome rhythm in the night. I twisted, turned, scrambled through garbage cans overflowing with rotting things, desperate for some escape. But he knew his territory. He cut me off, his laugh echoing, bouncing off the alley walls. He grabbed my arm in an iron grip. I fought like a cornered animal, kicking, scratching, even biting. He just laughed harder. Then came the darkness as something slammed hard into the back of my head. I don't know how long I was out, only that I woke to the sound of wet chewing and the smell of blood, stronger and closer this time. My hands were bound above my head, my ankles lashed together. Every part of me ached. I tried not to make a sound, but I saw him look up from his meal, a flicker of interest replacing his mindless hunger. The only question now is when my turn will come. Will it be slow, like hers? He seems to savor the torture. Every moan, every plea must feed him somehow. Or will he simply get bored? I don't know what's worse, the waiting or imagining my own end. I think I hear footsteps approaching. My blood turned to ice. The footsteps were heavy, rhythmic, and eerily close. Every muscle in my body tensed, the throbbing pain from my injuries ignored in the face of this new threat. Was it him returning for another agonizing bite, or was it someone else, someone who might actually help? Through the blurry haze of fear and pain, I saw the basement door creak open. A sliver of light sliced across the filthy floor, revealing the silhouette of a tall figure. Panic surged through me, robbing me of any rational thought. Before I could even scream, the figure spoke. "John. Is that you?" The voice, surprisingly, was female and strangely familiar. My mind, clouded with terror, struggled to place it. It couldn't be. Could it, Emma? I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart pounded in my chest, a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. The figure stepped fully into the dim light. It was her. My neighbor, the one who always waved and offered friendly hellos while walking her dog. Relief washed over me, momentarily erasing the terror and pain. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was saved, but as Emma moved closer, her features twisted into a grotesque parody of a caring smile. Her eyes, the same shade of green that had always seemed so gentle, now held a chilling glint. "Don't worry, John," she said, her voice a sickeningly sweet melody. "I'll get you all caught up on the news." Her hand reached into her purse, pulling out a glinting knife that mirrored the cruel light in her eyes. The basement door slammed shut with a bang, plunging me back into darkness, the only sound my own ragged, terrified gasps. Who was Emma? What did she want? And was I truly any closer to escape, or had I just stumbled into an even deeper nightmare? The questions echoed in the silence, unanswered, as the metallic tang of blood filled my nostrils once again. My throat burned. My vision swam. Whether from terror, impending doom, or the blood loss from my unseen wounds, I couldn't tell. Emma's words echoed in my mind, each syllable dripping with a sinister glee that sent shivers down my spine. The metallic scrape of the knife against concrete sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But it never came. Instead, there was a sudden scuffle, a muffled grunt, and the sickening thud of flesh hitting the floor. When I dared to open my eyes, the world was a grotesque dance of shadow and flickering light. Emma lay sprawled on the floor, unmoving. Next to her, the hulking figure of the madman loomed, his face obscured by the darkness. He held the knife in one hand, the other stained red and glistening. He looked down at me, his silence heavier than any words. For a moment, I thought it might be over. Maybe the madness had shifted its focus, and he'd found a new plaything. But then, a smile stretched across his face, wider and more horrifying than before. "Looks like we have a party crasher," he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper. He took a step towards me, the knife catching the dim light with a wicked gleam. That's when I heard it. A faint siren, growing louder by the second. Hope, fragile and flickering, ignited within me. But then, the madman stopped. He tilted his head, listening intently. His smile faded, replaced by a fleeting flicker of something akin to fear. He turned towards the basement door, the knife still clutched in his hand. He hesitated for a long, agonizing moment, his gaze locked on mine. Then, with a guttural growl, he lunged for me. The world dissolved into a blur of pain and struggle. I fought with a primal desperation, fueled by the desperate hope of surviving just a few more seconds. But he was stronger, heavier, and fueled by a madness I couldn't comprehend. Just as my vision started to fade, the sound of the basement door bursting open filled the air. Then everything went dark. When I next woke up, the sterile white of a hospital room greeted me. The rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor thrummed in the background. My body ached, but I was alive. A police officer sat beside my bed, his face grim. He explained how they found me, tipped off by a neighbor who noticed the commotion and called the police. He didn't mention Emma. He didn't mention the madman. He just looked at me with a mixture of sadness and relief and said, "You're lucky to be alive." But as I lay there, the memories of the basement, the smell of blood, and the chilling glint in Emma's eyes all came rushing back. Lucky? Maybe. But what about the truth behind everything I witnessed? And what lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity? The answers remained elusive, a chilling mystery gnawing at the edges of my newfound freedom. The world seemed a little darker now, forever tainted by the horrors I couldn't unseen. And somewhere out there, in the shadows, a question lingered. Was I truly safe, or had the nightmare just begun? Months later, I still woke up in a cold sweat, clutching the sheets. The nightmares of the basement were relentless, replaying the horrors in vivid detail. I moved to a new city, a fresh start, hoping to outrun the shadows of the past. One day, while browsing a local news website, a headline stopped my heart. It was about a string of unsolved disappearances in the city I escaped. The description of the missing matched the victims I witnessed in the basement, the woman, and others, all with a familiar chilling detail. The killer was still out there. Panic clawed at me. My escape seemed less like a victory and more like a temporary reprieve. But then, I noticed a single sentence at the bottom of the article. A witness account mentioned a woman with striking green eyes trying to lure the victim away. It was Emma. Suddenly, everything clicked. Emma wasn't an accomplice, she was the mastermind. The neighborly facade, the concern in her voice, a chilling act to divert attention. The basement was her twisted hunting ground, and the madman, her puppet, controlled through an unknown means. Armed with this knowledge, I contacted the detective from my case. Initially skeptical, he became intrigued as I laid out my story. He agreed to investigate Emma, keeping my identity confidential. Weeks turned into months, and the news remained silent. Doubt gnawed at me, but then, one morning, my phone buzzed. It was the detective. He confirmed Emma's involvement, a hidden network of manipulation and control she'd spun for years. She was apprehended, the madman still at large, but finally on the run. As for me, I chose to stay in the new city. The scars, both physical and mental, remained, but the nightmares started to fade. I found a sense of closure, knowing that justice, however incomplete, had prevailed. The city I escaped from may have been a pit of darkness, but it also became the unlikely catalyst for my strength. I learned that true nightmares are not just in the shadows, but sometimes lurk behind the most familiar faces. And that even in the darkest of places, a spark of courage can illuminate the path towards a brighter, safer future.